What if I told you that the Samurai Jack you remember from your childhood was never the full story? That hidden beneath the epic sword fights, the futuristic cities, and the haunting silence,
Way to the past is once more beyond your reach. You can fly?
No, jump good.
were secrets so deliberate, so calculated, that you were never meant to notice them. And once you see them, you'll never watch the show the same way again. Samurai Jack wasn't just a cartoon, it was a puzzle, one that the great Genndy Tartakovsky and his team scattered across 5 seasons, daring only the most observant to piece it all together. And today, we're here to crack it open. To understand just how deep these secrets run, we need to go back to 2001. Cartoon Network was on a roll. Dexter's Laboratory, The Powerpuff Girls, Courage the Cowardly Dog. It was an era of amazing shows and some wild experimentation. But Genndy Tartakovsky, he wanted something different, something slower, more deliberate, something cinematic. Samurai Jack debuted as an event, a 3-part TV movie introducing a lone samurai thrown into a dystopian future ruled by a shape-shifting demon named Aku. The premise was deceptively simple. Jack's only goal was to return to the past and undo Aku's reign. But here's the first twist. You were never supposed to think of it as a kids' show. The pacing, the framing, the lack of dialogue for long stretches, these were all cues from classic samurai films, spaghetti westerns, even silent cinema. Genndy wasn't making something for Saturday morning background noise. He was crafting an animated epic. And to pull that off, the team hid layers, details that were invisible unless you were actually looking. Think about the other shows on TV back then. Bright, loud, rapid-fire gags, every second filled with noise. Samurai Jack? Sometimes you'd go 5 minutes without a single word, just the crunch of Jack's sandals on stone, the whisper of wind over desert dunes, the slow draw of a sword from its sheath. For a child, maybe it felt strange, quiet, even lonely. Nothing like traumatizing kids with existential dread disguised as action-adventure programming. But for Genndy, that was the point. To make you feel what Jack felt. And hidden in that silence were clues. One of the most subtle secrets in Samurai Jack is in its color design. Notice how most backgrounds aren't cluttered with details. Sometimes it's just broad washes of color. That wasn't because of budget constraints, as some believe. It was intentional. Apparently, Genndy and art director Scott Wills used minimalist environments to control where your eyes went. In battle sequences, the background would often shift to a single, flat color. Red for danger, blue for sadness, yellow for tension. A technique lifted directly from Japanese woodblock prints. Because why use expensive detailed backgrounds when you can just paint everything one color and call it artistic vision? Jokes aside, it was genius, really. It wasn't just aesthetic, it was a form of subconscious storytelling. At first glance, Samurai Jack feels episodic. Jack wanders, helps someone, fights Aku's forces, moves on. But if you track certain visual and thematic elements, you start to notice threads. A bird that Jack frees in Season 1 quietly reappears in Season 3. A ruined city from Episode 4 is rebuilt, in the background, in Episode 27. Even the bounty hunters who fail to kill Jack sometimes return years later. These weren't random callbacks. They were proof of a world that continued moving even when Jack wasn't there. A world we were only allowed to glimpse in fragments. Perhaps the most famous example is Episode 35, Jack and the Haunted House. For the first half, Jack doesn't fight at all. Instead, the episode plays out like a horror film. Distorted angles, shadows that move wrong, a soundtrack that shifts between silence and sudden sharp noises. But here's what you probably didn't notice. The animators intentionally broke Samurai Jack's own rules for this episode. The haunted house scenes used far more background detail than normal, making it feel cramped and suffocating compared to the show's usual open landscapes. Let's take our minimalist masterpiece and cram it full of details just to make everyone uncomfortable. Peak psychological warfare disguised as animation. That detail change was your subconscious cue. This place is dangerous. You probably know Aku's voice as the legendary Mako Iwamatsu.
Well, you see, Doc, it's been over 50 years already.
Who also provided the voice of Uncle Iroh in Avatar, The Last Airbender for its first 2 seasons. His performances could swing from uproarious to menacing in the space of a breath, thanks to a voice that was at once deep, theatrical, and endlessly versatile. What many fans don't realize is that some of Aku's most unforgettable laughs weren't single takes at all, but clever edits. Reportedly, Mako would record several exaggerated evil laughs in one session, and the editors would splice them together, overlapping certain notes to make Aku's laughter sound unnervingly inhuman. It's why Aku's laugh sometimes feels like it's bending in pitch mid-note, because it literally is. They basically auto-tuned evil laughter before auto-tune was even a thing, truly ahead of their time in audio manipulation. Now here's where things get darker. Samurai Jack was never supposed to end after Season 4 in 2004. The original plan? Continue the series until Jack finally confronted Aku in a climactic multi-episode finale. But corporate reality hit hard. Cartoon Network was shifting toward more comedic, toy-friendly shows. Samurai Jack's slower, more mature tone didn't align with that vision. Officially, the reason given for halting production was creative pause. Unofficially, it was low toy sales. Because nothing kills artistic vision quite like the inability to sell plastic action figures, the eternal struggle of art versus Happy Meal toys. The cliffhanger ending we got in 2004? That wasn't artistic choice, it was survival. And for over a decade, fans thought that was it. Reportedly, there was a planned episode during Season 4 featuring a massive battle between Jack and a platoon of Aku's robotic soldiers, done entirely in silence. No music, no dialogue, just sound effects. Why didn't we see it? Network executives allegedly feared it would be too slow for kids. The sequence was reworked into a shorter fight with background score, losing some of its intended tension. Because God forbid children experience the artistic beauty of silence, they might actually have to think instead of being force-fed constant noise, right? But fragments of that original concept survived. If you watch episode 47, there's a short section where the music cuts out entirely mid-fight. That's the ghost of the scene they wanted to make. Genndy has spoken about the exhaustion of keeping Samurai Jack's quality consistent. Each episode was essentially a short film requiring storyboarding that was far more intricate than most animated shows at the time. Some animators reportedly worked 14-hour days, sometimes sleeping at the studio. And because so much of Jack's storytelling relied on visuals instead of dialogue, every frame had to carry meaning. One misplaced shadow could break the mood of an entire scene. Imagine the pressure. One wonky shadow, and suddenly your profound meditation on honor becomes a comedy about bad lighting. By the end of Season 4, burnout was setting in, and without network backing for more seasons, many of the core teams scattered to other projects. But here's the wild thing. Even after more than a decade off the air, Samurai Jack's story wasn't finished. Because when it came back in 2017 for its final season, the secrets got darker. And the final nail? It's one that completely changes what you thought you knew about Jack's journey and his fate. Because apparently, waiting 13 years for closure wasn't traumatic enough. They had to make the ending emotionally devastating too. For over a decade, Samurai Jack fans lived in limbo. Season 4 ended in 2004. And then, silence. No announcement, no closure, just emptiness. That's not just a production gap. That's a generational gap. Kids like me and maybe you who grew up watching Jack were now adults, and the world had changed. But the secret is that Genndy Tartakovsky used that gap to shape the final season into something much darker, more violent, and more emotionally charged than the original. Season 5 didn't just continue the story, it mirrored that 13-year absence within the show's universe. Jack himself was trapped in an endless battle, unable to age, unable to go home, and losing hope. That meant older fans watching could relate in a way they couldn't as kids. Nothing says, "Welcome back to your childhood," like crushing existential despair. So thanks for the finale, Genndy. We truly appreciate it. The truth? This wasn't just a clever storytelling move. It was a statement on time itself. Genndy knew his audience had matured, so he gave them a Samurai Jack who had matured too, and suffered for it. When Adult Swim greenlit Samurai Jack's 5th and final season, Genndy Tartakovsky originally imagined an even darker finale. Aku would destroy the time portal, stranding Jack in the bleak future and forcing him to endlessly battle evil without ever returning home. That ending would have underscored Jack's role as a timeless mythic hero whose struggle never truly ends. But knowing that fans had waited more than a decade for closure, Adult Swim asked for a more conclusive conclusion. Genndy and his team rewrote the finale so that Jack finally defeats Aku and reopens the portal, yet at a meaningful cost. The world is restored to its former peace, but Jack must let go of everything he's come to love in the future, making his victory both triumphant and bittersweet. When Adult Swim announced the final season, Genndy had a vision, but it wasn't the one we saw on screen. According to crew interviews, an earlier draft of the ending had Jack failing. Yes, Aku would have destroyed the portal, Jack would remain trapped in the future, and his fight would go on forever. Why? Because Genndy saw Jack as a mythic hero, not someone who necessarily wins in a conventional sense. But here's the kicker. Adult Swim stepped in. They knew fans had been waiting over a decade. Giving them no closure at all would have been a riot waiting to happen. So the ending was rewritten to give Jack victory, but with a cost. And that cost? Ashy. Something like, let's give the fans what they want. Sort of. Here's your victory, but we're taking your girlfriend. If you've seen the finale, you know the bittersweet knife twist. Jack defeats Aku, travels back to the past, and finally returns to his rightful time. But Ashi, his love, his partner in the fight, and one of the most human parts of his journey, simply fades away. Why? Because she was born from Aku's essence. Without Aku, she never existed. It's poetic, it's brutal, and it's intentional. Genndy wanted the ending to sting, to remind us that victory always comes at a cost. But here's the paradox. Ashi never should have been able to travel back to the past in the first place. If she ceased to exist once Aku was gone, logically she couldn't have been there during the final battle in the past. When your time travel logic has more holes than Swiss cheese, but the emotional gut punch is so effective that nobody cares about the physics. But this wasn't a mistake. It was Genndy bending logic for the sake of emotional impact. He wanted you to feel Jack's heartbreak before you realized the timeline contradiction. Samurai Jack's ending is not a happy one. Sure, the villain is gone, the past is restored, and peace returns. But Jack is left standing alone under a cherry blossom tree, the weight of everything he's lost pressing down on him. This is where the real meaning of the series lands. Jack's journey was never just about defeating Aku. It was about finding peace within himself. And even in victory, he still has to face the fact that his life is forever changed. The final shot of a ladybug, a symbol of hope that had appeared earlier in the series, tells us that Jack will go on. But it's a quiet hope, tinged with sorrow. It's not the triumphant hero's return you expect from a cartoon. It's a mature, reflective ending meant for the kids who had grown up into adults alongside him. Because nothing says childhood nostalgia like realizing your favorite cartoon hero is clinically depressed and dealing with survivor's guilt. We live in an age where most shows wrap up with clean bows, happy reunions, and fan service-heavy finales. Samurai Jack did the opposite. It reminded us that life is messy, that even when you win, you might lose something you love in the process. And maybe that's why people are still talking about it years later. Because deep down, we all know that time moves forward, people change, and not every story ends the way we dream it will. Who knew that the most realistic portrayal of adult life would come from a cartoon about a time-traveling samurai fighting a shape-shifting demon? Samurai Jack's ending isn't just a conclusion, it's a mirror. It reflects the passing years, the losses we endure, and the quiet strength it takes to keep walking forward, even when the cherry blossoms fall. Genndy Tartakovsky gave us a masterpiece disguised as an animated action show. It was a series about honor, patience, and the loneliness of purpose. Its secrets, from hidden cultural influences to production struggles and alternate endings, reveal just how much care and thought went into every frame. And while Jack finally returned to the past, maybe the real journey was ours. We started as kids, cheering for a warrior with a sword. We ended as adults, understanding the weight that sword carried. The real treasure was the existential crisis we developed along the way. Thanks for that profound life lesson, Cartoon Samurai. That's why you'll never look at Samurai Jack the same way again. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and tell us in the comments below. Did you like the ending? Or would you have wanted a more generic, happy ending?